Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, baby, live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the great state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the program. It is hour one of this beautiful, wet, snowy, and wet and icy Tuesday. Yeah, it's quite a wow. It's the weather is all over the place, all over the state. So first things first, I know we got Brad Keithley waiting in the wings. We're about to jump into it with him for the first weekly top three of the year. Oh, it should be a doozy. Oh man, it's gonna be and we're gonna go over a bunch of stuff. And then in hour two, Chris Story is gonna come in and finish up the hour with our weekly or with our weekly life coaching lesson, the first one of the year. But first things first, I need to mention weather is not great everywhere. In fact, Anchorage and Matsu schools are both closed due to strong winds and icy roads pretty much everywhere. Also here on the Kenai Peninsula, the KPB released about 40 minutes ago that there's going to be a 2-hour delay for all Central Peninsula schools from Nikiski to Sterling to Tustamina. And so there's a 2-hour delay, and they said if you don't think it's safe to the parents based on your neighborhood conditions for your child to travel, please keep your students at home and simply call the school to let them know they will be absent and the absence will be excused. So it's Alaska, and it's weather, and it is what it is, man. Wet and rainy, and 4 inches of snow in the Matsu, plus another 1/4 inch of ice. So anyway, lots of weather things happening, but schools closed in the Matsu and Anchorage, and delayed in the South Central Peninsula, and up in Fairbanks. Sorry, kids, you all got to go to school. That's just that. They were tougher in Fairbanks, man. I remember one time they closed the schools in Fairbanks because it was 71 below or something. I mean, come on. Anyway, Well, let's get to it. It's time for the weekly top 3. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, joins us this morning for the first weekly top 3 of 2025, and there is a lot to go over today. So let's discuss it and talk about it. Good morning, Brad. How are you doing?
Michael, I'm doing great today. First off, congratulations. Congratulations on reaching January 1st, getting the stations converted over, getting up and running, and still being alive. So congratulations for all that.
Boy, I don't know about that. It could be. I mean, I'm barely alive. It's wow. Let's just put it that way. Wow. So anyway, yeah, thank you, Brad. I appreciate it. Let's dive into it, man. We got a lot of stuff to cover, from the governor's budget to the which we barely got a chance to brush over, and now more things happening. South Central Gas has been in the news over the last 10 days, and there's a lot of vacillating going back and forth. So let's get started. We're going to start off with the governor's legacy, quote unquote. What say you, Brad? What say you?
Well, there was an article in the ADN over the weekend, an op-ed by Tim Bradner, who I usually have a great deal of respect for. You can tell that Tim's a little biased toward the producers, but still have a great deal of respect for. And the title of it just, snapped my attention immediately. And I thought, okay, we're going to get into some stuff here. The title was, as he starts his final 2 years, Alaska Governor Dunleavy's mixed legacy. And I thought, all right, we're going to talk about the budget. We're going to talk about the fact that Dunleavy's legacy, right as it stands right now, is running the biggest deficits in state, the biggest string of deficits in state history. Sean Parnell has the record for the biggest deficit in state history, and I'm not sure that will ever be topped. But Dunleavy right now is on the precipice of running the record for the biggest string of deficits in state history. And as we discussed on the last program last year, in his 10-year plan, where he is supposed to propose how he deals with those deficits, propose how he gets to a balanced budget, he didn't. He just left the red, the deficits going through the end of the year.
I love how he's just like, "Yep, you figure it out. See ya."
Yeah, it's exactly right. So I thought, okay, here's going to be an article by Tim Bradner, who's, a budget guru, a fiscal guru, a general all-around knowledgeable guy about the state. He's going to talk about Dunleavy's legacy. We're going to get into the budgets. Nope. Not a single word about the longest string of deficits in state history. Instead, Tim uses this op-ed to talk about that the governor hasn't spent enough. He gives a report card for the governor, and he counts off. These are the 2 primary things that Tim starts out with. 1, the governor hasn't spent enough on education.
Right.
The governor's legacy is suffering because he hasn't spent enough on education. He needs to spend more. And 2, the governor's legacy is suffering because he hasn't supported defined benefits, the return to defined benefits for government employees, which also will cost the state, which also will deepen the deficits. So if this is the attitude of people in the state, that Dunleavy is getting Dunleavy's legacy is in jeopardy because he hasn't spent enough. If this is the attitude of people who are writing the news columns in the state, and Bradner writes a column, writes news for the frontiersmen. If this is the attitude of people who are writing the news in the state, then maybe all hope's gone. Maybe we're not. Maybe we're not going to dig our way out of this.
Well, and I think the worst part is that it's not just he wants to spend more. There was a chastisement in the beginning because he's like, he said what was his legacy? There's 3 negatives. This was the governor's disastrous first term budget where he took a meat axe to state programs in the university. I think he got bad advice. He changed out advisors and reversed course. He had Donna Arduin, who is acknowledged as one of the preeminent in the country, one of the preeminent budget fixers in the country to bring states back from the brink. So they tried to start at the very beginning, and Bradner's here poo-pooing it, saying, well, that wasn't, sorry, that's it. I mean, it's just, this whole thing is so tone deaf. I don't even know what to say.
Yeah, I really, my opinion of Tim stepped down a couple of notches as a result of this op-ed. And then he gives the governor credit for energy. Well, we're going to talk about South Central energy and the mess that's in the second segment. But Bradner gives Dunleavy higher marks for energy, and talks about the carbon credit program and the long delayed regulation of long distance power transmission and the creation of an entity to deal with long distance power transmission. It's just it goes on and on with things that are, okay, maybe when you get down to the lower level of things you want to talk about. But this is a governor who is on track to set a record for the number of deficits run in state history. And there's not one mention of that. The whole last part of the column was just sort of a joke. I mean, it was Bradner going off talking about how Dunleavy's proposal to establish a Department of Agriculture, which also would increase government spending, how Dunleavy's proposal to establish a Department of Agriculture is a good thing, and goes, and talks about food security and all that sort of stuff. So if this is how people are going to try to bend news people, because remember, Tim writes news for the Frontiersman. If this is how news people are going to bend the narrative as we go into the last 2 years of Dunleavy's administration, then we're not focusing on the right things. And to add sort of insult to injury, personally also, Larry also has a column at the new year. The headline of which is Governor Dunleavy has a choice: continue down his PFD path or work on a long-term solution. And basically Larry's pitch is, you got to give up on the PFD. That's a long-term solution. That's the long-term solution of many in the legislature. Just forget about the PFD. We're going to spend it, move on. Yeah. And, and so basically the pitch is, and this is, I've seen Dermot do this too. Just irritates the heck out of me. People who claim to be focused on working Alaska families, people who claim to be focused on outmigration, people who claim to be focused on the economic impact, the economic travails that middle and lower income Alaska families are facing. Talk a lot about that. Talk a lot about, the need for the state to be more responsive to that. And then, so that's on the one hand. And then on the other hand, they go, we need to cut the PFD. We need to cut out the PFD because that's just wasted spending. Well, cutting the PFD, we might as well start the new year with this. Cutting the PFD is the most regressive tax ever proposed. It is the hardest. It hits the middle and lower income Alaska families harder than any other alternative. So when you get personally talking about, we need to find ultimate solutions, and they need to be, they need to be responsive to the economic times that Alaska families are facing. They need to be responsive to the fact that we're having outmigration. They need to be responsive to the fact that costs are spiraling out of control. And we'll talk about, some of that in the third segment, but we need to be responsive to all of these hardships that are being pressed down on working Alaska families. And then he goes, and by the way, we need to solve that by adopting the most regressive tax ever proposed that takes the most of all the alternatives, takes the most out of that segment's pocket. It's just humorous. So I had hopes, as I said, I had hopes when I saw the title of Tim's article, the title of the op-ed piece being, as he starts his final 2 years, Alaska Governor Dunleavy's mixed legacy. I had hopes that we were going to have somebody who was focused on the fact that this governor is running the longest string of deficits in the state history, second to Parnell, near deepest deficits in the state's history. I had hoped we were going to have somebody focused on that, but no,
Yeah.
Their concern is we aren't spending enough on all this stuff, folks. We aren't digging the deficits deep enough.
Right. Well, and like you, my opinion of Tim Bradner dropped several notches after reading this because, I mean, again, this is indicative of what's happening in most high places in the state, the legislature, leadership, everything else. Nobody is talking about the deficits. Nobody is discussing in deep terms what it looks like this year, the next 10 years. They're all about, well, we're just not spending enough. I mean, this is a theme that's going on, and there's very few legislators who are talking about it, and it's not just disappointing; it's frightening that people are being willfully blind in this area. All right, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, is our guest. We're up against the break. We're going to continue here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show continues with more common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. The weekly top 3, number 2, dead ahead.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, Brad, hold on one second. I just want to make sure. First couple days, I'm always a little nervous to make sure everything's working properly here with the new stuff. Okay, we're all good. Everything's good. Yeah, everything's good.
And now that you own it, you want to make triple sure that everything is working properly.
You thought I had a bunch of screens up before. Now I've got more windows popped up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different windows in 5 monitors right now. So it's like, oof.
Is one profit loss? Do you have one that's measuring?
One
ad revenue.
Sleep lost, sleep gained, and it's all going down. So it's like the state budget. It's like, the deficits just keeps going down. Brad, this is first of all, welcome to the new year. Hope you had a good one. Hope you enjoyed your time off. Curse you and your time off. But I hope you had a good one and hope you did something fun. But I'm not joking. I mean, it's really kind of scary to see and watch the people who are supposedly in charge, who are supposedly our leaders, thought leaders, political leaders, and they are completely ignoring the 10,000 pound orangutan in the room with a stick that's about to beat us to death. And they're just all like, it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine.
Yeah, it's and particularly Tim. I mean, I've said it a couple of times. I'll say it again. Tim is a newsman. Tim writes news articles.
Yeah.
For the frontiersmen and others. And if that's his attitude going in and writing those news articles, we're not going to get news. We're going to get, that slant in the articles as well. It's going to be editorial bleed into his editorial position, bleeding into the news articles. Here's maybe, I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about this when we talk about South Central gas in the next segment. But the budgets are hard. The budgets are presenting very hard issues, very hard choices. There are solutions, but they're hard. And you have to go out and you have to sell them. You have to explain them. You have to develop them. They're hard. Going along with the flow of the unions of saying, oh, we need more money for defined benefits, and going along with the flow of the education industry of saying, oh, we need more money for education. And then God only knows what flow is going on with the Department of Agriculture, but going on with the flow, that's relatively easier because you got all these people around you that are saying, oh, we just need to spend more. We just need to spend more. We just need to spend more. The solution to out-migration is defined benefits. No, it's not. But that's what people are saying. So you're sort of going along the flow. And that's a little bit easier. We don't have people, it starts with the governor, goes through many of the legislators, but now it's into the news industry. We don't have people who are willing to say, wait a second, we're in a death spiral here and we're adding to it. We have out-migration and we're using tools to deal with out-migration that are increasing out-migration, that are taking money, increasing the economic position, the economic hardships faced by middle and lower income Alaska families, the people who are leaving, the out-migrators. We are using tools that increase the death spiral. We don't have people who are willing to stand up and say, look, we're making this problem worse. There are ways to make it better, but we need to start talking about ways to make it better. And we just don't have people to do that. I mean, Personally writes a weekly column for the newspaper he owns down in Wrangell that often gets picked up statewide. And basically his pitch is just wipe out the PFD, forget about the PFD, forget about middle and lower income Alaska families, and just, take all that money and just start spending it on other things. And it's just, we don't have people who are willing to talk about the hard issues and take on the hard issues and come up with the solutions to the hard issues. We have people who are going with the flow, and the flow is heading downward. If there's any doubt about that, the flow is heading downward.
Right. No, and again, until somebody acknowledges that there's it's like the alcoholic. Until you admit there's a problem, there's no fixing the problem. And there's no problem. The only problem they see is that they're not spending enough. And, eventually that gravy train will run dry. And then what will we do? That's the question. All right, 5 seconds. Let's get to it here. We go. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Let's do this thing.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Oh, yeah, we're back. The weekly top three continues. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for sustainable budgets. As we continue. I mean, man, I did not want to start off the week with this. I mean, just this tough stuff. Again, not only failing to acknowledge that there is a deficit problem, but just in talking about ever increasing. Number two is that the legislatures, their spending list, again, not acknowledging that we have a problem, not acknowledging that we're going into the year with a $1.5 billion deficit, plus probably a couple $100 million in the supplementary budget and everything. No. That list is growing, Brad.
Well, that's segment 3, Michael. Segment 2 is South Central Gas.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got ahead of us. Let me go to South Central Gas, Brad. Let me tell you about South Central Gas. Go ahead, Brad. I screwed it all up.
No, that's fine. So South Central, and I probably could, just bounce to 3 and then come back to 2, but I want to talk about South Central Gas. So Nat Hertz wrote what I think is a great article, a disturbing article, but a great article in that it at least outlines what the problem is on South Central Gas over the break. And the title of it, it's in all of the papers. Maybe it hasn't made Fairbanks yet, but it's in all of the other papers. The title of it is Regulators Advocates Warn of Utility Inaction as Alaska Gas Shortfall Looms. And basically what that article is we're spinning. It discusses the fact we're spinning. We got a lot of solutions out there. We just keep spinning on those solutions without actually acting on one. And the date of the projected South Central gas shortage, 2027, keeps getting closer and closer, and we keep spinning and spinning and spinning. It takes time to implement solutions. And so, we keep spinning while the date's getting closer. And the article really focuses on the concerns people have that we continue to spin. One of the things that's troubling, frankly, in the last part of the article, Nat has some quotes from Bob Pickett, who's a long time, going all the way back to the Palin era. He was appointed during the Palin era. Bob Pickett, commissioner on the Regulatory Commission of Alaska, the utility body or the regulatory body that has jurisdiction over utilities, and has the statutory responsibility to ensure that the utilities are taking the steps necessary to provide adequate service at a reasonable cost. The regulator that stands in there and says, you're supposed to say you're not doing X that ensures adequate service, do X or, jerk your certificate or something. And he has a discussion with Pickett and has quotes from Pickett where Pickett's essentially spinning and where, it's essentially saying, Pickett's essentially saying, I'm trying to point out the utilities don't have plans for how they're going to deal with this shortfall.
Right.
But without saying, and the RCA is going to step in and make sure there isn't a shortfall by enforcing the obligation the utilities have to ensure adequate service, that they have adequate gas supplies. And so you get this sense at the end of the article that we're just all spinning in a circle. You know, everybody's looking at everybody else. It's there's a theme here. It's sort of like the budget. Everybody's looking at everybody else and saying, well, are you going to do something about this? No. Are you going to do something about this? No. Are you going to just, it's just this giant circle where everybody's looking at everybody else to make progress. Dunleavy held a press conference yesterday. And the press conference was to focus on, you know, the advances that we're making on various energy projects. One was this new contract that Hillcorp's entered into with Hex Fury, John Hendricks's company down in the Cook Inlet, that's supposed to deliver additional gas supplies. But Hendricks hasn't found the gas supplies yet.
Right.
He hasn't drilled the wells necessary to develop the gas supplies yet.
Right.
But that was a big part of it. And then the second thing was they put up Frank Richards from AGDC to talk about the progress that AGDC was making with respect to the AGDC line, the AKLEG line. Let me read from the letter that AGDC sent to the legislature in April. This is AGDC board. We have instructed AGDC staff to secure commitments to initiate FEED, the remaining engineering cost estimating and construction preparation needed before making a final investment decision on the pipeline phase no later than the end of this year. Commitments to initiate FEED. If AGDC fails to secure funding for the entire project or for the initial pipeline phase of the project by that date, we have instructed AGDC staff to initiate the work required to shut down and either sell the Alaska LNG project assets or put them into storage if there is insufficient value realized for the state of Alaska. Hard and fast date, end of the year. They put Richards up yesterday. This is after the first of the year. They put Richards up. Did he announce commitments to initiate FEED? No. He announced that they're in talks with somebody who, if they reach finalized agreements with them months down the road, then maybe they'll be ready to go forward with FEED, not at the third party's expense, but backed up by a guarantee from ADA that the state would pay for FEED.
$50 million, yeah.
$50 million. If AGDC fails to secure funding for the entire project, did he or the initial pipeline phase of the project by that date, by the end of the year, did he announce that AGDC had secured funding? No. But did they announce, consistent with this letter from the board, signed by the board, sent to the legislature, did they announce, okay, we're closing it down? We didn't get it done. We said we were going to do it by this date. No, they didn't even reference the letter. It was like, ooh, we got a potential that somebody's going to actually sign agreements with us someday.
You had until the end of the year, and now you're in the first of the year. Now you're like, oh, just give us a little more time. I mean, it's insane. You know what caught my eye on this, Brad, because I'm looking at electrical bills and everything else in this whole article from Nat Hers, was the quote from the head of Homer Electric, Brad Janorski, who went on to say, oh, you know, the expiration of the NSTAR contracts is not an issue that keeps me up at night. You know, we've got no problem, even though it's going to run out in 3 months. It's going to run out in March of this year, the end of March. The contract with NSTAR ends. And he's like, oh, I'm not worried about it. And then, but he was pressed and they said, well, do you have no, we don't have any commitment yet. I mean, where is the urgency from the utilities to get this fixed? They're sitting around here. It's like the biggest circle jerk you've ever seen. They're just all looking at each other, glad handing, like, oh, it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine, just fine.
And like AGDC, even when they meet a date, even when they hit a date that they themselves set for either, fish or cut bait, we're going to fish or cut bait by the end of the year. When they hit a date, it's like, no, we see a fish out there someplace, and we know that we may be able to hit it if we just, if we spend more and keep going down this road. So let us keep fishing. I mean, no one will say, this is it. We're going to go in this direction because we haven't been able to land any other direction out there. Chugach in an op-ed that we talked about in the last program, right before Christmas, Chugach said, we're going forward with LNG. But have they filed anything to go forward with LNG? Have they filed anything with the RCA that sets their path to go forward with LNG? No. I mean, it is. No one wants to make the decision. And again, the decisions are hard. I mean, the decisions are, we don't have gas in the Cook Inlet. It's too expensive to develop additional gas in the Cook Inlet. The contract we've entered into with Hex, with Fury, provides for a price that's higher than imported LNG prices. We're demonstrating there's not, gas at the price we need, at the economics we need in the Cook Inlet. No one's going to land the AGDC line, the AKLNG line is not going to land anytime in this century the way we're going. They can't even get it done by a date they set themselves. We keep spinning and without making decisive steps. And if we hit 2027 and we don't have gas supplies, it's not going to be because there weren't options. There were options. LNG, imported LNG, was an option, a hard and fast option. It's out there on the water. You can see it going by on its way to Japan. It's economic. You can look at the current prices and the futures market for LNG, and it's more economic than continuing to try to develop Cook Inlet supplies. There are solutions. If we hit 2027, it's going to be because everybody twiddled their thumbs and didn't make decisions.
You know why they're waiting? They're waiting for the legislature to come in session. They want the legislature to come in and bail them out so they don't have to go to their ledgers and explain to their ratepayers and their shareholders and their co-op members why they have to, put out $50 million to stand up a facility or do something like that. I mean, that's what they're waiting for. It's all a delay. They're hoping the legislature and the state will bail them out. Am I wrong?
No, you could be exactly right. I mean, that's what Frank Richardson, AGDC, is obviously. Frank is counting on the legislature to forget the letter that they got from the board last spring defining when AGDC was going to finally call it a day. They're counting on the legislature forgetting that, and they're counting on the legislature appropriating the $50 million to ADA that ADA needs in order to provide the guarantee to get somebody to maybe, because nobody stepped up to do it, maybe get somebody to front $50 million for feed, knowing that they're going to get it back from ADA at the end. Yeah, maybe it's just to continue this crisis in hopes that the legislature somehow bails them out. But if we hit if that's right, and we hit 2027, don't look at the fact that there wasn't a solution to this. Look at the so-called leaders, both in the industry, John Sims, for one, at NSTAR, and at the RCA, for failing to lead, for failing to live up to the obligations they have.
Yeah. Well, and I was encouraged to begin with when I started reading the article and I saw that the guy from the RCA was there asking questions. I'm like, man, did we finally get somebody's attention? But that's all it was basically just he's not calling the RCA into session to say, hey, we need to hold their feet to the fire or anything else. It was more like, what's going on here? I mean, maybe we've got one guy on the RCA who's actually asking the right questions, but where's the rest of them?
Yeah, and I like Bob a lot, but he's not even asking the right questions. I mean, Bob's asking the question, how are you gonna allocate supplies if you have a shortage? That shouldn't be the question. The question should be, how are you going to avoid a shortage? What steps are you taking to avoid a shortage, to live up to your certificate obligation to have adequate supplies at a reasonable cost? Tell me what you're doing to do that. Not tell me what you're going to do if you don't live up to it and you have a failure of supply. Tell me what you're doing to live up to your certificate obligation. And that's the question that should be asked. That's the question that should be pressed. That's the question that the RCA should be ready to act on if utilities don't have good answers to that.
Right.
But that's not the question they're asking.
Well, and again, this whole thing this affects the entire state. This is all of the peninsula, all of South Central, the Matsu, Anchorage, all the way up to Fairbanks. Everybody's affected, and everybody's running around like, the answer is obvious. The answer is LNG. And whether it's an emotional tie to Alaska Gas, whether it's a dithering to make sure that the legislature comes in and bails them out or whatever it is, we're all going to look back at this and go, this was totally avoidable if we'd just done the right thing. And where's the second report? Every news story talks about the first report, but where is you can't find a mention of the second report.
Well, because utilities don't talk about it, and the news doesn't talk about what the utilities don't talk about. And Bob, I mean, even Pickett's not talking about the second report. For those that are just catching up, the utilities had a consulting group come in and do a report about what they should be doing about this in 2023. The report came out in 2023. It says you should be doing imported LNG. That report also said there was going to be a second report that provided the steps. The second report was done. We know it was done because a lot of people mentioned it was done, but they've never released it. So we don't know what the second report says.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we still have no idea because probably it says the one thing that nobody wants to hear, which is LNG is the way to go. I mean, that's the problem. And nobody wants to face that. They're hoping that the legislature will bail them out yet again. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. Number 3, this time, the legislature spending. Back with more after this.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, one more time here just to check my work to make sure everything's good. And we'll be going on from there. Okay, all right. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. I'm becoming more and more convinced, Brad, that this is all about delay in the hopes that the state will pick up the bill.
Yeah, but
that's kind of what I'm coming to the conclusion on.
What bill is the state supposed to pick up? I mean, we know Cook Inlet does not have adequate supplies at a reasonable cost in order to meet the challenge. We know that. We know that from the Hendricks contract. We know that in order to elicit those supplies, NSTAR had to pay more than what it would have to pay for imported LNG. We know that Cook Inlet doesn't have supplies. We know that phase 1 of AKLEG, which is now being touted as a solution, can't get here in 2 years. Hell, it can't even get here in 8 years. But we know it can't get here in time. So we know those things. What is it the legislature is supposed to do? I mean, they can't create, well, maybe they can create gas out of, if they talk enough, but they can create a lot of hot air, but they can't create gas in the legislature. So what is the legislature supposed to do? It's just that nobody wants to make a decision. Sims doesn't want to make a decision because, in my opinion, he wants to run for governor, and he doesn't want to be the guy that says we need to import LNG. So he doesn't want to say that. He just wants to keep spinning in circles to avoid saying that. Chugach is willing to say it, but they haven't followed up yet in terms of making a filing to these barges and the facilities you need to offload the barges don't appear just overnight. You got to have plans for them, and we're 2 years away from the date that's projected when we have a shortage of supply. So you need to be making filings. You need to be getting underway to get permits. You need to actually get boots on the ground to get this stuff done. They're not doing it. AKLEG is just distracting everybody's attention by saying we promise by the end of the year we will have something concrete, or we will start shutting this thing down. And then we get to the end of the year and just go, yeah, forget that promise. We think we see something out there on the horizon.
Yeah. And then the governor sneaks in the $50 million and then says it's going to be on the supplemental. I mean, what? I mean, you can't even get a private party to pay for the $50 million in feed money as a prospectus to do it. So you have the state do it. And then you'll be like, we'll sneak this into the butt. We're upside down $1.5 billion, and you want to add another $50 million. It's madness. Absolutely madness.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like on the budget too, Michael. I mean, this segment 1 and segment 2 are basically the same theme. People don't want to make the hard decisions. People don't want to face up to the hard realities.
And most people are not paying attention. Here's an interesting comment from Skeets. He says, what's the number on importing LNG? What I've seen will triple the electric bill. What you don't understand, what you don't understand is that even if it did triple the electric bill, which is wrong, but even if it did, AKLEG is even more expensive than imported LNG at the ratepayer's expense. Even more. That's the thing. Why are we so hung up on this Alaska gas thing? Yes, it would be nice if we could get the 17 trillion cubic feet of gas from the slope to somewhere where it's usable. But it would also be nice if I had, gold-plated pigeons fly out my backside. But it's just not going to happen. Not going to happen.
To just focus on that for a second, the increase is about 10% because most of your electric bill comes from paying for the hardware, the generation plants and the distribution lines to get the electricity to you. And so the increase in the fuel cost is actually a fairly minor part of your electricity bill. And the increase in the fuel cost caused by importing LNG is just frankly a fairly minor part of that as well. So the estimates we've seen from Chugach are 5 to 10%. Let's say 10% is the increase. The triple is coming from people who want to keep AKLNG alive, want to keep, Cook Inlet alive, paying, exorbitant prices into Cook Inlet. It's coming from people who are trying to misdirect Alaskans, cause fear about imported LNG because they want to pursue these other projects that are more expensive. So A, let's get the number right. It's 5 to 10%. And B, let's focus on the fact, as Michael just said, imported LNG is not more expensive than the alternatives. It's compared to the alternatives, and imported LNG is less than the alternatives.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. This is just again nuttier than squirrel poo. This whole thing right now is just crazy. We're going to jump back into it. Here we go. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Let's do this thing. Here we go. Okay. We're back. Sorry. Too many things going on here. We're back this morning, ready to go. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, is our guest. The final piece of this puzzle is, again, we've been talking about it all morning, the willful blindness of everybody, leaders, political leaders, thought leaders, journalists, everybody, about ignoring the deficit problem. And the legislature is not immune from this, Brad. Their answer, spend more.
Well, it's not even just the legislature, Michael. I mean, let's just set the scene here. Over the next 10 years, averaged over the next 10 years, the state is running about $1.9 billion in deficit. 35% of spending, of projected spending over the next 10 years is deficit, uncovered. Huge red dollars, huge red, as far as the eye can see. That's the baseline. And so instead of confronting that baseline, saying, what the hell are we going to do about that? What we've got is like Tim Bradner that we talked about in the first segment, saying we need to spend more. Forget about, I don't want to talk about the deficit. We just need to spend more. We need to spend more on K through 12. We need to spend more on defined benefits. We need to spend more to stand up a Department of Agriculture, a separate Department of Agriculture with its own commissioner and its own staff and its own lawyers and its own everything. We need to spend more to do that. And now we've got other people, not even legislators, Michael. We got other people out there wanting to spend more, and these various things are rising to the top. The Fairbanks News Miner was the one that got my attention. They had an op-ed right after the first of the year. This is the title, Alaska's rising healthcare costs demand immediate action. Bradner didn't even cover that. Bradner was just adding it for K through 12 and defined benefits. And here the News Miner editorial board is saying, if the state truly wants to be open for business and retain its residents, the Alaska legislature and the governor must take immediate, decisive action to reduce healthcare and insurance costs. So now we've got to spend on increased K through 12. Now we got to spend on defined benefits. Now we got to spend to stand up the Department of Agriculture. And now we got to start getting the News Miner. And we've also got to spend on healthcare costs. The governor and the legislature must take immediate, decisive action. And then we've got a task force that came in at the end of the year that the governor had set up about childcare and childcare, the availability of childcare, because that's been an issue that a lot of people have raised. And among the 46 recommendations from the Alaska Child Care Task Force is more state spending on childcare, more state spending in terms of subsidies, more state spending in terms of going out and hiring people to help facilitate childcare, more and more and more of that. So, and you can't find in any of these publications, you can't find, hey, we got a $1.9 billion average deficit over the next 10 years. We're 35% in the red. Alaska state government is more in the red than the federal government. We're running higher deficits than the federal government over the next 10 years. We can't find any editorials on that. You can't find any articles on that. You can't find any journalists willing to confront that and talk about it. They just want to talk about places where we do even more spending, K through 12, defined benefits, stand up to the Department of Agriculture, the News Miner, healthcare costs. The state now has to help out with healthcare costs. Alaska Public Media, the Juneau Empire, boosting wages among 56 recommendations from the Child Care Task Force. We're living in a fantasy world, and it's not just the legislature, Michael. It is the news publications themselves. I mean, I'm sure if I go back, I'll find a News Miner editorial that says, oh, and we got to get the budget balanced. But in the very next breath, we've got to get the state involved in healthcare. And we got to get the state involved in paying for healthcare to reduce healthcare costs for Alaskans because healthcare costs are too big. And then we got to get the state involved in childcare to reduce childcare costs. We can't afford all this. Alaska cannot afford all this. That's the article we need to see. And we need to see an article about how the hell are we going to deal with these deficits that we're digging. But instead, we got Tim out there trying to create the governor's legacy of, he gets plus points because he stood up a separate Department of Agriculture. Yeah.
Right. No. And that's, again, part of the problem here is that everybody is just being willfully blind to this. And you're right. A lot of this could be driven by a good, a journalist with integrity who looks at this and goes, well, wait a second. I'm looking at these numbers and they look all bad going forward. And yet you keep saying, and nobody's asking the question, how do we pay for it? Okay, childcare is great. How do we pay for it? Okay, you want to get into healthcare now. How do we pay for it? You want to increase the BSA by $1,900. That's $500 million. How do we pay for it? Defined benefits. There's no real cost analysis. Reason did one, but they're the really only ones that really put real hard numbers to it. And it's, again, it's $500 million a year. How do we pay for it? We're already in the hole right now. We're starting off at zero, $1.5 billion in the hole, and you want to add more. How do we pay for it? Well, obviously with the PFD. But when that's gone, how do you pay for it?
Well, and it's more, I mean, we've talked about it before, but and we talk about it occasionally, and we'll talk about it now. It's more than how do you pay for it? It's who pays for it. Because at the same time we got all this going on, we got an out-migration issue, right? We've got middle and lower income Alaska families. We're on net, we're losing middle and lower income Alaska families. Hell, we're gaining top 20% families. If you look at the IRS data, the top 20% families are going up, the number of top 20% families in the state. Where we're losing it is with middle and lower income Alaska families. That's where the bleeding is occurring. Working age, middle and lower income Alaska families. We're not replacing the losses. We have a net out migration. And so the question should be not only how do you pay for all this additional stuff that you claim we need, who pays for it? And when you use PFD cuts, when you use the most regressive tax ever proposed, you're disproportionately charging the very people who are leaving. You're making them pay more and more and more and more in order to get some additional services. That's the death spiral, guys. You're driving out the people. The people are leaving because the economic life here is too difficult, and you're making their economic life even more difficult by making them pay for all these additional bells and whistles you want to develop. If you want additional spending, then pay for it equitably. Pay for it across the board. Include non-residents as part of the revenue base. Include the oil companies, who are about $500 million a year down in terms of what they ought to be paying in terms of their constitutional obligation, maximum revenues. Have them chip in the additional $500 million that they're keeping in their pockets instead of contributing to the state. If you want to spend more, have them contribute. But the way we're doing it is the who pay for it question is we're charging the very people that we're driving out of the state.
And somebody just said that doesn't really, they're increasing, that math doesn't work. But that's what the labor data and the state data says, is that the quintile that is the top income earners, that percentage of people as a workforce, those people coming in actually increased, while the number of families in the lower quintiles also increased on the departure side. So we are losing people. We're losing more people in the middle and lower class than we are in the upper class.
Yep. I did an article. I mean, the IRS data shows it clearly. I did an article a few weeks ago, maybe a few months ago now, for the Friday landmine column, that went into the IRS data, looked at it by income bracket, and looked at the change by income bracket. And over the past 5 years, the number of households in the upper income bracket has gone up, as the number of households in the middle and lower income brackets have gone down.
Yeah,
clearly. And why? Because the top 20% doesn't contribute to the cost of government.
Yeah,
they contribute a very minor share in terms of the PFD cuts. Very minor impact on them. So it's a great place to be. No taxes.
Right.
You don't have to pay for cost of government. All of that's being pushed over on middle and lower income Alaska families, and they're walking.
Yeah. Last 90 seconds here, Brad. Final thoughts for today.
Well, it's the theme. We're not concentrating on the right things. We're not concentrating on the right things when we talk about Dunleavy's legacy. We're not concentrating on the right things when we talk about the budget. We're not concentrating on the right things or doing the right things when we do South Central Gas, and we're not concentrating on the right things when people like the news miners editorial board says we ought to be spending more on this, that, and the other thing. We need clarity of thought, and we need leaders who are focusing in on the things that matter. And we don't have that across the board.
No, I mean, they're ignoring it. They're completely ignoring it. The thought leaders, the politicians, the journalists, nobody's talking about the 10,000 pound elephant in the room that's about to squash you, that says, we have deficits. We can't keep spending more than we take in. End of story. End of sentence. Full stop. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Thanks, Brad, for coming on board.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Folks, we got more coming up. Hour 2 is dead ahead. I'm going to recap some of this and dive into this. We'll be back with more right after this. Okay. Yeah, Brad, I'm looking at all this and it's all I can think of is that these people are just willfully not paying attention to any of this at this point. I mean, it's so frustrating to watch.
Well, the numbers are there, Michael. I mean, you can see the numbers of where we are in terms of the budget. We publish them. I publish them on our various media sites every Friday. I publish what the budget's looking like based upon current oil prices and based upon the most recent Permanent Fund Corporation projections of the POMV. I publish those every Friday, and you can see the numbers. You can see those deficits out there. You can see them even from a static approach, like the governor's 10-year plan. You can see those deficits out there. You can see them. They're not being hidden. It's just that it's tough to face up to them, tough to talk about them, tough to talk about the solutions to them. People just don't want to do that. And you can see the numbers. You can see the numbers on South Central Gas. I mean, the 2023 utility report, the one we got to see, says clearly that it's more expensive to build the gas line down from the north. It's more expensive to develop additional Cook Inlet supplies because that we don't quite know where they are, and the exploration effort it would take to find them produces more expensive costs than imported LNG. I mean, it would be great, for example, if Alaska grew all of its own food, right? If we didn't have to rely on the outside. It'd be great if we had all of our own gasoline. It'd be be great if we had all of our own, if we were just a totally self-contained island, but we're not. We're dependent on the economics are that it's cheaper to bring in some stuff from outside, including gasoline. It's cheaper to bring in some stuff from outside than it is to the cost it would take to develop it here. And we've gotten to the point where South Central Gas is one of those commodities. It's cheaper to bring in from outside than it is to develop it here. The numbers are clear. Numbers are absolutely clear. I do a thing every Monday that look at prices, local prices compared to LNG, the futures market, and the numbers are clear. It's cheaper to bring in the gas from outside. We don't need that much. We need about $70 billion a year, and it's cheaper to bring it in than it is to undertake the cost to develop it locally. The numbers are clear, but people don't want to talk about it. They'd prefer to spin in a circle and blame somebody else. Just sort of this continual finger pointing all around the circle. Blame somebody else for not doing something about it, in hopes that lightning strikes, I guess, and all of a sudden some other alternative becomes clear. But we're running out of time,
right,
on that.
Brian says, I can't believe that Brad has to explain the economics of gas over and over and over. But again, we're the only ones talking about it. The news media is not talking about it. The journalists are not talking about it. The governor's not talking about it. The legislature's not talking about it. If they talk about it, it's all in terms of what can we do to help bolster this? What can we spend? How can we spend some money to make this work? And that's the problem. Nobody else is talking about it. And if we just continue to go la 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 la, put our fingers in our ear, when the yogurt hits the oscillating rotor, what are you going to do? You look back and go, well, we could have fixed that if we, but again, we could fix it now. We just have to have, like you said earlier, Brad, it's hard. Nobody wants to talk about austerity, which is what it would come down to.
Or who pays. Nobody wants to talk about the fact that in order to help deal with the out-migration issue, we need to take some of the burden off of some of the disproportionate burden. I'm not even talking about subsidizing middle and lower income Alaska families to keep them here. I'm talking about just treating them fairly, just taking the same share of income from them that we would take from everybody else to support government here. We don't even do that. We disproportionately burden the very people that are leaving. We disproportionately burden them more to to fund government. And so they go, the economics up there just don't work. Why would I go up there?
Right. Why would I do that? Why would I hurt myself by going there and doing that? And they must be leaving, Randy said earlier, they must be leaving because other states have a bigger PFD. I mean, again, this is not about an issue of bringing free people up here. This is about keeping the state spending under control. You cannot, I don't know how to explain this any clearer. Mathematics, arithmetic, you cannot continue to spend more than you take in indefinitely. And that's what we've become accustomed to in this state. For the last 10 years, 12 years, we just continue to spend more than we take in, and we expect that it's going to be forever, indefinite, and it's just not going to happen. Brad, final thoughts.
Well, we're going to, at least I, and in these segments and through my columns, I'm going to keep whacking away at it and using numbers, just using the actual numbers so that people can focus on what's going on. I don't know how to motivate people any better than to show the actual numbers. And we need leaders to start talking about the actual numbers as opposed to the emotion of, oh no, we need Alaska gas. We don't need that outside stuff. We need our leaders to start talking about actual numbers.
Yeah.
On the budget, on energy, and start dealing with the numbers as they are, not as they would, as they want them to be.
I won't hold my breath. Brad, thank you so much for coming on board. We appreciate it. We're out of time for today. Thanks for coming on.
As always, thanks for having me.
Folks, we're out of time. We got to go. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com, where you'll find the audio-only live stream, links to our social media sites, and more, and live around the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station, and or FM translator. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to hour 2 of the big radio show for this Tuesday edition of the Michael Duke Show. We just finished up with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. If you missed that, you can go back and listen to it on the podcast, which is available wherever you find your podcasts, including our favorite, Spotify. You can find it up there as well on Spotify. And you should go back and listen to it because, and I guess I can summate the whole thing here in one short phrase. The leadership in Alaska is failing us. And I'm talking about leadership at every level, political leadership for sure. The governor, the legislature, thought leaders, which would be, opinion makers, newsmakers, journalists, anybody who's out there in the public eye, for the most part, with the exception of a handful of us who have been talking about this for, in some cases for years. Nobody is talking about the economic catastrophe that the state is facing. Nobody. The governor puts out the reports. They put out the 10-year forecast. They put out the budgets, and then they act like it never occurred. They act like, okay, we put it out. Now we can forget about it. The forecasts clearly state that based on the current rate of spending, and by the way, the governor's forecasts are all very rosy in their spending expectations. They're not even best case. They're better than best case scenarios as far as the spending goes in the state of Alaska. And all of those reports say we are in a fiscal crisis. Each year for the next 10 years, we start off at ground zero. Every year we start off with at least $1 billion deficit. This year it's 1.56 billion, and that doesn't even include the supplemental budget, which the governor has already just thrown an extra 50 million on by giving okaying the ADA transfer to ADIA for that feed study, the $50 million that ADIA couldn't get the private contractors or private entities to pay for on the gas line study. Now ADA is going to front that money in the hopes that one day maybe some private entity will pay the 50 million back. But if not, it's just gone. In the meanwhile, we still have to spend it, $50 million. By some estimates, some of the people that I've talked to over the last week or so, they're estimating that the supplemental budget will be somewhere in the $200 million range, supplemental for 2025. Which will be the first thing that the legislature takes up, which means that we go from $1.56 billion in deficit to $1.75 billion in the hole before we even get started. And yet all anybody's talking about, and Brad just went through the litany of, Larry Persily and others who are basically the Tim Bradner, the News Miner editorial board. What we need to do is we need to spend more. We could have solved all these problems if we just spent more. MOAR. More. Right? That's the focus. The focus is not, we need to live within our means. We need to make sure we have a rainy day account. We need to make sure that there's something for our children here. We need to make sure that there's something economic in the private economy working so that people have a reason to stay and don't find greener pasture somewhere else. We need to find all those things. And yet no one is talking about. There's a handful of people. Ben Carpenter was a good example, and now he's gone. There's a handful of legislators that when we bring them on the program, they will talk about it when I bring it up, but they're not using it as part of their regular talking points. They're not making it the cornerstone of their fiscal plan or policy. And what we have is just this, again, willful blindness of them pretending like everything is fine. The house is on fire. The curtains are burning down. The flames are running up the stairs. And we're sitting here in the kitchen drinking coffee saying, this is fine. This is fine, just fine. Because we think that somehow we are immune to the rules of mathematics and arithmetic, that we can just keep doing what we're doing. Just opinion piece after opinion piece. Oh, well, what we need to do is we need to spend more on this or more on that. We have an out-migration problem. What we really need to do is put in a gold-plated benefit package and retirement plan for state employees, because that'll fix the whole out-migration. How many people who are out migrating were state employees? Has anybody done the math on that? I haven't, but since the state employees only account for about 30,000 working people in the state out of a workforce of somewhere in the 300,000 range. Even if we spent, is that going to fix the out migration problem? No. Again, I was saying it yesterday. Is anybody even asking the state employees why they're leaving, if they are leaving? If they're not of retirement age, why are you guys leaving? No, nobody's even asking that. They just assumed that it's because the benefit package wasn't good enough. Because the union bosses said that the benefit package is not good enough, and we need to fix it. If we don't get some leadership in this state, if we don't find a champion that's willing to step up and say, hey, we have a problem, then this problem is then this is not going to be solved. Now, we could subscribe to the philosophy that hey, we should just at this point the wheels are off the bus and the precipice is looming, and we should just, what we should do, we should just accelerate it so that when the crash happens, we still have assets and resources left after the fact to actually pick up the pieces. Instead of expending all the resources and all the assets between now and then, what we need to do is we need to accelerate it just to get it over with. I've heard people say that. We can't fix it. We might as well accelerate it so that the crash happens sooner so that we have something left over to pick up the pieces with. It's a train of thought, but for one, I don't want to have to. Why can't we look at the hard choices now? It's always easier to repair than it is to rebuild, right? It's always easier to face the problem before it hits that tipping point. But instead of acknowledging that there's an issue, what I want a legislator that every time they stand up on the floor, the chamber of the House or the Senate, or every time they get in front of a microphone, every time they do a Facebook Live, every time they do a post, every time they're talking to a constituent, the first thing out of their mouth is, how do we pay for it and who pays? You want this, you want that. Great. How do we pay for it? And not just how do we pay for it this year, because that's an easy fix, right? To most of these people. How do we pay for it this year? Well, we just cut into the PFD. But again, that's a self-licking ice cream cone. The PFD will continue to consume to the point to where there is no it won't be a 50-50, it won't be a 75-25, it won't be an 80-20, it won't even be a 90-10. It will be the government takes 100% of the draw. Then what happens? So when you say who pays, well, next year it'll be the PFD that pays. All of us will pay through the PFD cut. But eventually, it's going to go away. It will be consumed in its entirety. And then what do we do? Right? Then it's like I said before, that's when they look you in the eye with all seriousness and all earnestness and say, free rides die hard. It's time for you Alaskans to pay your fair share. Never acknowledging that we've been paying more than our fair share on PFD cuts and everything else. And then what happens? Then what happens once we get to that point to where the PFD's gone and they're looking for ancillary revenue to offset that? Well, then that will exacerbate the out-migration in the state of Alaska, because you're going to add a tax burden on top of everything else. And then when that first tranche of people leaves who say, wow, Alaska got real expensive and I just can't afford to live here anymore, so I got to go. And they leave, the costs remain the same or increase in reality. And those costs are now spread on a smaller pool of people who have to shoulder that burden and absorb those costs, which causes another tranche to go, Alaska's getting really expensive. and they leave because no one is willing to cut back on the size and scope of government to fit the mold. No one is willing to admit that we can't afford to continue on in the same fashion that we've been doing. It has become a habit, folks. It's become a habit force. Since 2013, 2014, we've gotten used to spending much more than we take in and assuming that it will all be fine. We've spent $18 billion, $20 billion over the last 10 years out of our savings, the CBR, the SBR, everywhere else. We've taken the PFD. And until somebody says this is a problem, nothing's going to change. It's going to get worse. And I, for one, would like to see it stop before we get to the tipping point. Because otherwise, maybe I just embrace the idea of full speed ahead, hold my beer, here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common Sense Radio.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay. We're in the break right now. I mean, I just don't see how this can continue. I don't see how some of these people with a straight face, I mean, this Larry Persily nonsense, these articles, this opinion piece from, again, Larry Persily is the poster child for this kind of stuff. But where is it here? Here we go. The governor has a choice. Continue down his PFD path or work on a long-term solution. I'm posting this up in the chat room right now so folks can see it. What is his long-term solution? What is the governor's long-term solution that Persily is advocating for? More spending. More spending. Just forget about the PFD. That's what Persily says. Forget about the PFD. That is the biggest state budget item, even though it didn't used to be a budget item. It used to be a simple transfer. Now it's a budget item. He goes on to say the honest truth is the state could pay a $1,200 dividend, provide a reasonable increase in funding to education, and balance the budget without drawing down savings. How? $1.5 billion in deficit. Does a $1,200 PFD even? Donna's in the chat room right now. Donna can hit me with a number again because I'm sure that I've forgotten it properly. But if I remember correctly, that $3,800 dividend accounts for something like $1.8 billion or something. Remind me, Donna, what the number is. But the bottom line is that if a full dividend is a big amount, but it used to be just a transfer. It wasn't counted as revenue. It just went straight to the people. It was a shall transfer. So even with $1,200, because I think $1,200 is what, $700 million in actual monies. I suppose I could do some simple math and see, because there's what, 660,000 dividend recipients is what it was, times $1,200. Yeah, $792 million. So I think I'm right. I think but again, $792 million, we're already $1.5 billion in the hole. And they want to increase. I mean, Loki Tobin's talking about a 1920 something, 1923, something like that, BSA amount. That's $500 million. They want to put the gold-plated defined benefits program back in. That's, $300, $400, $500 million a year. I'm sure they're going to want to do something with gas. That subsidy will be something. It'll be a royalty or it'll be a subsidy. If it's a royalty relief, that means that the money that would have come in from that has to be offset by something else. There's still costs involved and at some point we have to acknowledge that we just can't keep doing that. And here's the worst part. The worst part is like this Tim Bradner article, which just really frosted my cookies. Because the first thing he does is he goes after the governor's first budget, which I think was, maybe I should hold up on this and start talking about this in the break because we're only 40 seconds away. But to me, this is so indicative of what's going on. They want to shoot the messenger. They don't want to acknowledge that there's a problem. They don't want to, they don't want to tell people that they're, that there's bad things ahead. Again, it's la 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 la. Thank you, Donna. 2.5 billion. Yeah. So again, 792 million times 3. So there you go. All right, we're coming back into it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Let's get to it right now.
Public enema number 1. Oh, wait, sorry. Enemy. Public enemy number 1, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Yep. I'm a pain to politicians. They hate to hear what I have to say because it's common sense. So I just was going back over, again, rehashing some of the things that I said in the last segment with the audience on Facebook and YouTube and Rumble, which you can join, by the way, if you want to join us during the commercial breaks or whatever. You want to see a little bit behind the scenes. You want to hang out with some really cool cats and kitties, really cool kids. I don't know. That sounded weird. If you want to come out and join us, you can do so in the chat room at by going to facebook.com/Michael Duke Show /live, or you can do it on YouTube or on Rumble. We got about 80 people are here between all the platforms. It looks like about 70 people right now joining us out there, but you can come on in and be part of it and enjoy it as well. But I was just chatting with them about, some of the points I was just making. And one of the things that really gets me, and I got to be honest with you, I've read Tim Bradner for a long time. I know Brad's been a fan. He brings a lot of Tim Bradner's articles up over and over again. And he seems to be, not bad for a journalist and everything else. And then I read this opinion piece that Dunleavy was talking about, which I am posting up in the chat room right now. For folks if they want to go read it, if you missed it or you want to go find it. It's in the ADN, and it basically says, as he starts his final 2 years, Alaska Governor Dunleavy's mixed legacy. And I, like Brad, had some high hopes that maybe he would talk about, some of the problems that the governor has had that we can all agree on. He hasn't been a budget hawk. He hasn't stood by the things that he said. He hasn't really devised a plan, a few of those other things. But no. He brings out 3 negatives. And first and foremost, the first negative that he brings out, which he just really glosses over in about 3 sentences, is this. He said, I see 3 negatives. One partly corrected. This was the governor's disastrous first-term budget cuts when he took a meat axe to state programs and the University of Alaska. Okay, well, let's go back and look at hindsight for just a second and realize it wasn't a meat axe. It was, I think it was around a 10% cut to begin with. The university did get some of the deeper cuts, but overall it was about a 10% cut. And by the way, when that was all said and done, they actually increased spending that year. I mean, I think they whittled it back to something like $80 million. And then by the end, it was all, but by the end, it didn't matter. They'd spent more than that, than the year before when it was all said and done. But then Bradner takes this shot. He said, I think the governor got bad advice. He changed out his advisors and reversed course on many of those cuts. He's now supporting the university, for example, in restoring its funding, but the damage was done. He got bad advice. The governor brought in Donna Arduin, who is acknowledged nationwide as a budget fixer, someone who has gone in to state after state, California, Florida. I mean, there's half a dozen of them, where she's been brought in. She's the out-of-town expert with the briefcase that has the 10,000-foot view, that doesn't have an emotional tie to the state, and takes a look at it and says, you guys are a hot mess, and here's what you need to fix if you want to be sustainable and you want to survive. And she's done it in state after state after state. Again, an acknowledged expert in this specific field, fixing broken state governments, fixing governments that are on the road to bankruptcy. And yet, somehow we're special. And he just got bad advice. That was the only decent budget that the governor has put out, because it was true. It balanced the income and the outflow. It was a slap in the face to this idea that we could just continue on our merry path of spending more than we take in, and that there will be no consequences. That started under Parnell, right? 2012, 2013, 2014. I mean, we were spending gobs of money out of the CBR. The CBR at one point had what, 16 billion, 15, 16 billion dollars in it, just sitting there for a rainy day. And we gobbled that up over the course of 4 years. And the governor, in what I thought was a brilliant move, brought in the hired gun, that out-of-town expert with the briefcase, the person who's been there, done that, got the T-shirt that said, I saved the state government. And he brought her in. She made the recommendations. He put it out there, and it was true, but nobody wanted to acknowledge it. Nobody wanted to acknowledge that we can't continue on. We live in a fantasy in this state that there are no consequences to our fiscal decisions or our fiscal actions. And the governor, I mean, he got his little hand slapped, right? Rolled over and wet on himself and said, okay, from now on, I'll only deliver you these fictional budgets, these bestsellers, these novels of fiction that make you happy. I'll put in carbon sequestration as an offset. I'll write a budget that says we're going to give a full PFD, but says in no way how we're going to pay for it. I'll put in all these increases, and I won't suggest a single cut, because he learned his lesson, right? The electorate, the special interests, everybody who's living in their own little world of look at all the great stuff that we're getting for free, never analyzing how it's being paid for, never analyzing what happens, in 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years, never analyzing what happens then. They all just blissfully move along. And you could see it in the promises of a bunch of elected officials this last election cycle who all promised the same thing. Oh, if you elect me, I'll get those kids the money that they need. I mean, even though we're spending more than almost any other state in the nation on, education per capita, we need more. Oh, and then, this out-migration, it's a problem. And what we need is a gold-plated retirement system for the state employees so that we could stop the Again, how many of the people who are out-migrating were actually state employees? And the employees that are, why are they leaving? Are we asking that? We just assume that it's because of the benefits? Couldn't have to do with work culture, environment, couldn't have to do with COVID or post-COVID stuff, couldn't have to do with anything else. It must be the benefits. And so they get on their stump. If you elect me, I will put a chicken in every pot. Every child will have a gold-plated Chromebook that they can take home at night. And every state employee will be taken care of from cradle to grave, and that will stop the out-migration. And now, of course, the issue with the gas, which I am convinced that the utilities are just they're just dithering, waiting for the legislature to jump back in session so that they can go to the legislature hat in hand and say, hey, there's a bunch of infrastructure here we're going to have to pay for and everything else. And our ratepayers just don't deserve that. So what you need to do, state of Alaska, is you need to pony up some money so that we can build out whatever facilities, whether it's an LNG line or whether it's from the North Slope, or whether it's a gas liquefaction or regasification plant or whatever it is. That to me, that's what it looks like. They're dithering until the legislature can get back in session, and then they'll ask the legislature for more. And this is not simply an Alaska problem. I mean, we're seeing the same thing at the national level. Nobody wants to be told the truth. I'm always reminded about the riots in Greece. Do you remember, was it 10 years ago, 12 years ago, where Greece, the country, was bankrupt essentially, and they went through forced austerity measures? And there were riots in the streets and people protesting about austerity. And I was watching this and I'm just thinking, okay, all right, I understand you're upset. Of course, it's upsetting when you're used to living a certain way or getting a certain thing, and then it stops. Of course, it's upsetting. But at what point do you not understand bankrupt? Your money has become valueless. You at what point do you realize that things cost money and you can't just pretend, you can't just live the same way if there is no money coming in? And that forced austerity was shocking. Now, again, that was after the fact. That was after the wheels came off the bus. If they had done bits and pieces of that ahead of that time, sure, people would have been upset, but it would have been an easier approach, right? But that's what happened when the governor put out his first budget back in 2018, when he put that out there, and it was an austerity call, and people were like, oh, we just can't do. No, they protested. We live in a world where no. But there will be a time when there is no more money. And one of two things will happen. There will have to be some forced austerity, or they will just start taxing us at every level, which will force more people to leave the state, which will cause that burden to be on a smaller amount of people. Classic death spiral. And then eventually that wheels will come off that bus because there's just not enough people to sustain it at the current level. We desperately need someone to be talking about these things in a leadership position. I mean, I could talk about them all day till I'm blue in the face, as witnessed by what we've done over the last 10 years. But somebody in a position of actual power, a governor, a majority leader, a minority leader, who every time somebody sticks a camera in their face or a reporter clicks a recorder in their face, they should be talking about this as the biggest problem that Alaska faces, the existential fiscal crisis that Alaska faces. Because until we start talking about it, it's never going to change. And in fact, it's only going to get worse. And we can't fix it until we acknowledge it and start talking about it. Okay, we got to go. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll continue with more Chris Stories coming up next for our weekly life coaching right after this.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes,
allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. I suppose I should get caught up in the chat room before we call Chris real quick here. I brought it up, says Harold. I brought it up. I was laughed off the podium. I brought it up. I was laughed off the podium. Did you bring it up during your debates with the legislature? Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. Brian says it's not the lack of people talking about it. It's getting the impacted people to act. Yeah, well, that's true. Golden handcuffs. Frank says, I thought out-migration was good. Alaska is supposed to be a national park. Let's see. Fat Ray says, I wonder if the $16 million budget deficit the FNSB school district is running on will come up soon. I hear lots of angry voices about 5 school closures, but no one asking about how we got to the $16 million deficit. I don't think it was $16 million deficit. I think it's a 16% enrollment decline. But anyway, I mean, nobody's talking about the fact that part of the problem here is the decline, right? TR says, if Governor Dunleavy had stood by that budget, we wouldn't be in this mess. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Brian says, in defense of debt levy, there was not the expected / advertised support of the body politic because the same crowd screaming cut suddenly didn't want those cuts. Yeah, no, this is not all on the governor. There's a slew of Republicans who were in there who they bear a fair share of this because they did not stand up for the governor's vetoes on that budget. Because they were all for cutting as long as it wasn't cuts for them. That's what it was all about. All right. Let's get over here. Let's see what Mr. Story has to say here. Get him ready and squared away.
Good morning, Michael.
Hello, my friend. How are you doing today?
Excellent. You're not wasting any time, jumping right back in with both feet.
I'm trying, doing my darndest here, trying to get things all squared away, and keep all the lights and the wheels on the bus at the same time. You ready for this morning?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. 3 stages of self-development. Perfect morning for that.
3 stages of self-development. Okay, not 1, not 2, but 3. Okay.
No, could have been 4, but nope.
No, could have been
distilled it down to 3.
Yeah, that's how good you are. You distilled it down to 3. All right. I'll put you back on hold then here, and let me make sure that see if there's anything else that I missed about it. Brian had said it's not the lack of people talking about it, it's getting the impacted people to act. And Frank says impacted people are working. Well, that's not an excuse, Frank. Sorry. Yes, we're all working. Yes, we're all busy. But that's not not an excuse. We can all be busy working. We still have to pick up and we still got stuff to do. I'm just looking back for that story. Looking back for that story on the Fairbanks school districts. Where is it? Right here. Let me look here, see if I can find it. Or 5 schools recommended for closure. Yeah, because I know they had a 16% decline. Whoa. They pulled it down. Okay, KTUU pulled the story down, so I don't know what's going on with it. But yeah, again, I knew that was going to happen. As soon as they announced those school closures, there was going to be an outpouring on Facebook of everybody else. Not our neighborhood school. My children once, and it just this emotional tie to whether or not their kids went to school A or school B. So it's just, just doesn't make any sense. All right. 650 enrollment loss this year. Yeah, they said it was a 16% decline in the news story. Melissa, how big is the budget deficit at the Fairbanks School District? How big? Because they said it was a budget deficit and a 16% decline in enrollment. What is the budget deficit as well? Because Fat Ray was asking there on YouTube, so I just want to know what the answer was there. All right, Chris, the 3 steps to what again?
3 stages of self-development.
3 stages of self-development. See, I can remember things. All right, let's get back to it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Let's continue ahead. Let's get it done. Here we go. Right?
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
And welcome back. One final segment for today. We finish up every Tuesday, as we normally do, with a little bit of life coaching. And we bring on for that the guru of positivity. He's a realtor. He's a potter. He's a writer, an author, a speaker, a podcaster, a man among men, the guru of positivity from South Central. Chris Story joins us this morning. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Could we add raconteur to that list?
Raconteur.
Going forward? I mean,
yeah.
if you don't mind, I just would like to hear you say that one.
Raconteur. Yes. He's a raconteur. He's a Renaissance man. All right. Well, Chris, today you wanted to talk about the 3 stages of personal development. Somebody just said future KPB mayor, Chris Story. I don't know why you'd wish that on anybody.
Right. What did I do to that person?
Yeah, really. Why do you hate me? But the 3 stages of personal development. Let's hit it, my friend. What do we need to learn today from you?
And that's the question. Exactly. What is it? And I think, so number 1 would be a realization of your need. So as you look at 3 stages of developing yourself, your personal power, your own ability to navigate the world more successfully, you need to know what you don't know. Most people, I'd contend, most of us want to do good, be it in our community, on our job, in life in general, in our families and relationships, conversations. We want to do good. We want to do our best. But I think like a fish doesn't know it's in water, you don't know what you don't know. So you need to have as that first stage of self-development is, and it could be one new skill you're trying to acquire, or it could just be turning the ship around in general. You need to know what you do not know. You need to have an understanding and a realization of what you need. Before you can begin to develop, you need to know what it is that you are missing. And there's a lot of ways to go about doing that, including just some self-reflection, like we've talked about many times before, having honest and real conversations with people you trust, and discovering for yourself, what is that need? Where are you missing in life? What skills are you missing? Soft or hard skills are you missing? And then begin to develop those or that skill and get there. And there's no excuse anymore, because every single one of us can learn almost any skill we wish online for free. So we have the biggest library ever in the history of mankind in our palm at any given time. And we can choose what we do with our technology, be it to denigrate others or to, malign or to just, waste time. And all of that's fun once in a while to do, not a criticism of that entirely. But when we want to develop ourselves, we have the ability to gain, acquire, learn any skill or piece of information we wish at our fingertips. We just need to know and have a realization of what do you need. And just remember, the fish doesn't know what's in water. You may not be able to see in your own blind spot what you're missing, but there's people out there that can hold up a mirror and help you. And either hire a coach or a good friend that you trust or a family member. And I happen to be married to a life coach. That helps because there's always a mirror around, like, hold on, look at this. Oh, okay, thanks. And then go develop it. But that's the first stage of self-development or self-improvement on anything you wish in life, is a realization of your own need. What do you need to learn?
Well, and you mentioned something, this, knowing, figuring out what you don't know. I mean, I will say that has been my life over the last 10 weeks, 12 weeks. Is the biggest impediment to everything that I was doing was that, a lot of times I just didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know the right questions to ask sometimes because I didn't have the information. And I would say that's probably in some ways the toughest part. And that's why it was so important for me to have somebody who is an expert in certain things, to be able to go to them and say, okay, what am I not asking? What am I not thinking about? What am I not, and so, again, you don't know what you don't know, but sometimes you don't even know the questions to ask. And that is important to have that outside counsel for that.
And see, I would have thought your speech impediment would have been the greatest impediment, but
True.
I'm just, hey, I'm of the speech impediment community. I can make that joke. I overcame a massive lift, and it does squeak back into my life once in a while. So I can make that joke. Everybody just calm down. Okay, the second stage of self-development is trials without fear. A low bar risk. You don't start off as a flying Loenda on, the 100th floor. You start off on a wire that's about a foot off the grass. And then you build skills. So you trial and error with these new skills and whatever it is you're developing. Now that you've got the realization of what you need, go practice it, and practice while the bar is low. And just think in terms of everybody starting out learning something new as errors. And in fact, we can all slip back into, I mentioned my speech impediment. If I have, a couple of martinis once in a while, my list will become, I hear it again. I got to work on. It's something that is consciously there every now and then. We all slip into an old habit. It could be anything. It could be around food. It could be around, our inactivity. It could be around anything. So trial and error is an important practice. Seth Godin wrote a book about it in 2020 called The Practice. Why is it that doctors and lawyers are relegated only to practice? I mean, they're always practicing and practicing whatever it is. We're all practicing. And every now and then you're going to fall. And that's okay. You can get back up. Trial and error is part of life. It's part of self-development. And once you're in that, okay, I realize what I need. I'm going to go after it. I'm going to learn. Expect to fall once in a while. It's fine. Get back up and continue towards what it is you're improving upon in life. So trial without fear of failure. That is the second stage.
Okay, trial without fear, and do it like you said. Do it when the stakes are low. Do it a foot off the ground. Don't get up to the second story and then try and check it out. Let me hold my beer. Watch this. No, you need to do it when you're 5, 6, 8 inches off the ground. So if you fall, the grass is soft.
And I think it's interesting too. A couple of other investor mentors that I've followed over the years have said, you want to take risks, like just investing. Take that, for example. When you're investing, you got to take risks. That's the only where reward lives, in the land of risk. But you don't want to risk so much at once, you can't play the game anymore. Like if this risk doesn't pan out, I'm out of the game. You want to be able to sort of like, maybe strike out, but the game isn't over. So you don't risk everything. And this is where trial without fear comes in, the fact that, maybe you're investing in real estate for the first time. Maybe you don't put every nickel into that one investment. You're going to put some, and you're going to leverage the rest. And so you've got some trials without fear. You get to mitigate that however you choose. And then the third step in this third stage of self-development would be once you've acquired unconscious skill, or what Robert Greene calls in his book Mastery, fingertip feel. Like you have a sense. And there again, though, the risk is that this is subconscious control. You know it, and you subconsciously do these things. We can get lazy and relax and slip up. That's okay. We're going to course correct, reset, and continue back on. Now that we have a realization, we've had plenty of practice and trials without fear. We now have an unconscious skill that we sometimes still need to go back and fine tune or rehone or remind ourselves that, I'm off course a little bit. I feel it. And it could be something if you've started a new eating practice or health exercise or writing or a new job, or you want to go back to school and we just had one of our associates, Sarah Richardson, just went back and got a master's degree in her spare time. And it's like, wow, how did you do that? Well, there was, unconscious skill there. And so undoubtedly, though, along the way, you're going to have to course correct. And that's okay. Don't berate yourself. This is self-improvement, not self-loathing. Don't stare into the dark abyss too long. If you get off course, just come back. You already realized what you needed. You practiced, and now you've got that unconscious skill and fingertip feel. And if you mess it up, that's okay. Get back to square one.
Because that's the habit force that Napoleon Hill talked about, right? I mean, you can trip, you can fall, you can stumble, but every time that you correct, you're reinforcing that habit force and making it easier to avoid the misstep the next time, or to get out of it quicker and quicker.
Yes, precisely. Yep. And it's interesting because in this business, people probably wouldn't think that Michael Dukes ever gets nervous. Like before you come to the microphone, this guy doesn't get nervous about anything. That you don't have probably the butterflies that cause you to be, herking up into a trash can just before the mic opens. But you've trained that energy, that the nerve, because you care about the product you're producing every day on the show. You care, but you've trained that nervous energy into how you show up every day at 6 o'clock in the morning. It's incredible, but it's nerves that's been converted to a different kind of energy. But that's because you've gone through all the stages of self-development and self-improvement in this field. And the same said for anybody else that is starting something new or wants to. As we're in January 2025, this could be the best year of your life if you apply these three stages to whatever it is you wish to do. And don't hold yourself up to such a high bar that you have immediately risked everything. You've lost face in front of yourself, family, friends, in the community. That's it. I'm going to go back. I knew I should have never tried it. No. Realize what you need. Trial without fear. Practice. And again, once you've achieved that unconscious skill, that fingertip feel, just keep in mind you may still slip up, and that's okay.
All right, 60-second recap, Chris. Give me the 60-second recap of the 3 steps to self-improvement.
Understand, I think most people want to do good in the world. Most people want to do good in their life and show up. They don't know what they don't know. When you walk into a store, they've never been trained by Disney that if you get within 5 feet of a guest at Disney, you must make eye contact. And if you get within so many feet, you must say hello or greet them. And people don't know what they don't know. So realize you might be living in your own blind spot. Take a close look or ask a trusted friend. This is going to be a great year.
All right. So learn what you need, learn what you know. Don't be afraid to step on the high wire at 1 foot. And if you make a mistake, so what? Just correct and move on. Self-improvement. It's always improving. Chris Story, the man from Homer. Thank you, my friend. As always, you picked us up for today. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Happy New Year.
You too, my friend. Thanks for coming on board. All right, folks, we are out of time for today. Tomorrow, Mike Shower should be joining us, working on some other guests as well for the rest of the week. And, of course, Firearms Friday coming up as well. Be kind. Love one another. Live well. We'll see you tomorrow. The Michael Dukes Show. Common sense, liberty based, free thinking radio. right, my friends. Out of time for today. Got to go. Got a full, busy day ahead of me today. Thank you for being part of my morning. It's good to be back. Feel like I'm back in the saddle again, back in the groove. Appreciate you all. Appreciate you all a lot. Don't forget to check out the Common Sense Corps if you want to help support the show. It's one way to do it. I got to go. We'll see you. Have a great day.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.